Hello! Alright, so the purpose of this video is to show you how you can solve for x by using this method called completing the square. So I'm hoping some of you remember from what completing the square was right before quarter one ended. But it's okay if you forgot. Let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so let's say I gave you something like x squared plus 8x equals negative 15. Okay, and our goal is we need to solve for x. So one way we can accomplish this is by doing this thing called completing the square. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you guys forgot how to complete the square, we're going to put parentheses around our x squared terms and our x terms. So once we put parentheses around both of those terms, what we can do is we can go ahead and write this out. So we have x squared plus 8x, and we have a blank on this side. And then this equals, so we have negative 15 here, and we're going to add another blank on the right hand side. So it looks something like this. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to consider what's in our parentheses here. So if I kind of see what's in the parentheses here, we need to identify our b term. Our b term is just that one right there. So what I can see is b is going to equal 8. Okay, next what we want to do is we need to calculate b divided by 2 squared. So b divided by 2 squared, plug that in, 8 divided by 2 squared, so that is 4 squared. 4 times 4 is 16. So this means 16 will go here. So this is like how I was mentioning earlier, right? If you're trying to balancing out a scale, right? If you're trying to balance out a scale, you want to balance out whatever's on the left-hand side with the right-hand side here, right? So what we have is if we have a 16 here, this means in order to balance out the scale, we also need a 16 on this side. Now, the interesting thing about this is we don't have a coefficient here. If we had a coefficient here, then we have to multiply it by that constant on the outside. But in this case, we don't have a coefficient. So we just put a 16 right here. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to simplify this. So what we want to do is take a look at this, what we have in the parentheses. In the parentheses, we need to figure out two numbers that multiply to 16 and then add up to 8. So two numbers multiply 16, add up to 8. Do that correctly. It should be 4 and 4. Divide each of those numbers by your a term. The a term is going to be 1. So when you go ahead and write your factors, this is 1x plus 4 times 1x plus 4. And that's what that factors to on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and write that. So we have x plus 4 times x plus 4, and then equals, then we have negative 15 plus 16, and that's going to be a positive 1. Okay, what I see here is these factors are both the same. Since those factors are both the same, we can group them together. So this is x plus 4 squared equals 1. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to get rid of the square. So in order to get rid of the square, so recall, right? So what I showed you earlier, right? If I gave you x squared equals 256, the inverse operation of squaring something would be taking a square root. So by taking a square root, the square root cancels out with the square, and we get x equals plus or minus 16. So exact same idea comes when you're doing something like this, right? So in order to get rid of the square here, the reason why we want to get rid of the square is we want to solve for x. So to get rid of this square, what we want to do is we want to take the square root. So we take the square root of both sides, the square cancels with the square, we get x plus 4 equals plus or minus 1. Okay, so now we can consider two different situations. So we have x plus 4 equals 1, and we also have x plus 4 equals negative 1. Right? So now we can solve for x twice. Solve for x twice, we get x equals negative 3 here, and then this one we get x equals negative 5. So these, if you're wondering, are the two possible x's that are going to solve that expression. So x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 5. Okay, now that I've shown you how you can do this by completing the square, I'm going to show you a different way that you can do this. Now, this way that I show you, it's not going to happen all the time. It's not going to happen all the time, I'll tell you that much. But if you kind of see this, I'm just going to rewrite everything from the beginning. So we had x squared plus 8x equals negative 15, right? So what you could do is you could actually add 15 to both sides. If you add 15 to both sides here, what you're going to get is x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. And then what you could do is you could factor this expression. So if you factor this expression, you're finding two numbers that multiply to 15 and add up to 8. Do that correctly, it should be 5 and 3, because 5 times 3 gets you 15, and then 5 plus 3 gets you 8. Divide each of these numbers by your a term in front, which is 1. So this, if you factor this, it should be x plus 5 times x plus 3 equals 0. Then you could go ahead and solve for x. X plus 5 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. Subtract 5 on both sides, you get x equals negative 5. Subtract 3 on both sides, you get x equals negative 3. And as you see, if you were to go ahead and pause the video, look at what we did last, compare it to what we did here, you realize you're going to get the exact same thing. So, of course, like I said, this won't happen all the time. Okay? In the next video, I'm going to show you another example. Okay, bye. Hello. All right, time to do another example. So let's say I gave you something like this. 2x squared minus 12x equals negative 10. Okay, so what I want to do, what we can do is I want to group together my x squared term and my x term. Group them together with parentheses. So what we can do is we can look at to see what these two terms have in common. As you can see here, I see we can pull out a common 2. They both are common multiples of 2. So if I go ahead and pull out 2, we get 2 times x squared minus 6x equals negative 10. Okay. What I see next, what we can do is we can go ahead and put our blanks in. So we have 2 times x squared minus 6x, and then we have a plus something in here, and then that equals, so negative 10, and then plus something else. So plus something else. We need to fill in those blanks. Okay, so like I mentioned before in the past, what we would do is we want to go ahead and look at what's in the parentheses there, identify our b term. Our b term is going to be negative 6. We need to calculate b divided by 2 squared, and that's what goes in the blank here. So b divided by 2, so that's going to be negative 6 divided by 2 squared. So it's negative 3 squared. Negative 3 times negative 3 is going to be positive 9. 9 goes here. So what that means is, in order to balance out this scale, right, what I told you earlier, where we have a 2 times 9 on this side. So we have an 18 on this side. So that means we have to put 2 times 9 on that side, if that makes sense. So what we have is, this is going to be 2 times 9, right? So now let's go ahead and clean this up. So what I see here is this can be factored, right? So this expression can be factored. We need to find two numbers that multiply 9 add to negative 6. Do that correctly, and it should be negative 3 and negative 3. Yep, multiply gets you 9, and then add gets you negative 6 here. Divide each of them by the a term in front here, which is going to be 1. So this will factor to 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 3. 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 3. And let's go ahead and clean this up. So negative 10 plus 18 should be 8. Okay, next, what I see what we can do is we can get rid of this 2. So in order to get rid of the 2 on the outside here, again, our goal is to get this by itself. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. 2's cancel. And actually what we can do, I see here, these two terms are the same. Since these two terms are the same, we can rewrite it as x minus 3 squared. And then 8 divided by 2 is going to be 4. If you cannot see that, just write those steps out separately. Okay. Next, what I see what we can do with this is, like I told you earlier, we want to get rid of the square. So in order to get rid of the square, we're going to take this thing called a square root, right? Take the square root of both sides, square, cancel with the square root, we get x minus 3 equals, and the square root of 4 is going to be plus or minus 2. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to solve for x. So in order to solve for x, what we can do is we can add 3 to both sides. So if we add 3 to both sides, this cancels, and we get x equals 3 plus or minus 2. So let me go ahead and write that up here. So there are two possible solutions that we're looking at. We have x equals 3 plus 2, or x equals 3 minus 2. So basically what this means is, so x is going to equal 5 or 1, right? So let's go ahead and write that there. So x equals 3 plus 2, so this means x is equal to 5, yeah, or x equals 3 minus 2, so that means x is going to equal 1. So those are possible solutions to this problem. Now, I'm going to show you another way that you could go ahead and do this. Now, like I told you earlier, not all these problems are going to end up like this. So let's say we start all the way from the beginning. 2x squared minus 12x equals negative 10. So let's say you use something like that. What you could do is you could add 10 to both sides here, and you want to get 0 on the right hand side. So you get 2x squared minus 12x plus 10 equals 0. Then what you can do here is each of these terms are all common multiples of 2. So you could go ahead and factor the 2 out, get x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. What I see here is we can actually factor this now. We can find two numbers that multiply to 5 and add to negative 6. Should be negative 1 and negative 5. Divide each of these by the 1 in front. So when you factor this, it should be 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 5. So let's go ahead and write that over there. 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 5 equals 0. Next, what we can do is want to get rid of the 2. In order to get rid of the 2, divide each of the sides by 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0, so we get x minus 1 times x minus 5 equals 0. Now what we can do is we can solve for x. So x minus 1 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. So what we can do, add 1 to both sides, we get x equals 1 here, add 5 to both sides here, we add 5 to both sides, and we get x equals 5. And as you see, those are two different ways that you could go ahead and solve it. Now, like I mentioned earlier, not all of these problems can be solved this way. So what if I gave you something a little bit harder? Like, what if I gave you something, so let's say I were to clear the screen here. What if I gave you something like x squared minus 10x equals negative 13. Now the problem with this, if you try to do something like this and try to factor it, you're not going to get something nice. You're not going to get nice whole numbers, unfortunately. And then some of you might just figure, oh yeah, well, it's not factorable. And that's actually true to an extent. It is not factorable. But what you can do is you can still solve for x, right? So I'm going to show you how to solve for x in the next video. Okay, bye. Hello. All right, so continuing where we left off, I am going to show you how you would solve for x. And what this means is, well, unfortunately, you're going to have to complete the square. All right, so, and this will tie in that radical form that I showed you earlier. Okay, so let's say what we want to do is we want to complete the square and solve for x. So what I see here is I can put parentheses right here. And if I do that, basically this becomes x squared minus 10x plus something. And then that equals negative 13 and then plus something. Okay. As you guys have started to see a pattern with this, take your b term, divide it by 2 and square it. So what we have is negative 10 divided by 2 squared is going to be negative 5 squared. That's 25. 25 goes on this side. We have no coefficients in front. 25 will go on the other side there. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to factor this. So in order to factor this expression, find two numbers that multiply 25, add up to negative 10. Do that correctly, I think that's negative 5 and negative 5. divide each term by the number in front, which is 1. So it's going to factor to x minus 5 times x minus 5. Next, we do negative 13 plus 25, and that is 12. Let's group these factors together. We get x minus 5 squared equals 12. Next, we want to get rid of the square, so we're going to take a square root. Square cancel with the square root. We get x minus 5 equals the square root of 12. Now, the square root of 12 can be broken up, right? 12 can be broken up into 4 and 3. And I see here, 4 is going to break up into 2 and 2. So if you guys play around with this is x minus 5 equals the square root of 2 times 2 times 3, right? So now what we have is look for your partners in crime. One will get shot and one comes out alive. So what we have is this is going to become x minus 5 equals 2 times the square root of 3. Actually, if you're wondering, there should be a plus minus in the front here, because when we take a square root, we're going to consider both the negative and the positive solutions. Okay. So next what we want to do is we want to solve for x. Continue to solve for x. So what we can do is we can go ahead and add 5 to both sides. So if we add 5 to both sides, what we have here on the right hand side here, we're adding a constant with a radical. So they're not like terms. So this is going to cancel. We get x equals, we're going to put the 5 on the outside. So we have 5 plus or minus 2 square root 3. Okay. So if we were to go ahead and write our possible solutions, this means x equals 5 plus 2 square root 3, or x equals 5 minus 2 square root 3. So these are our possible solutions. Now, of course, what I could have you do is if you actually did have to go ahead and solve it, I guess like put the decimal value, right? If I really were to actually have you do that, let me try to do that real fast. So 2 times the square root of 3 and then plus 5. So this would be approximately like 8.464. And this one, so 2 square root of 3. And then let's see, so it'd be 5. Hold on. 5 minus that, and that is going to be about 1.536 or something. So if I actually had you go ahead and simplify that, that is how you would do that. But if you want to just leave it in this radical form, that is completely fine. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen here, and that is basically how you would do it. It looks a little messy, but that is basically how you would do that. Okay. Let's say I give you something else. X squared plus 4x equals 71. X squared plus 4x equals 71. And our goal is we want to solve for x. So in order to solve for x, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and in order to complete the square again, put parentheses around our x squared terms and our x terms. So when we go ahead and write this out, this becomes x squared plus 4x plus something, and then that equals 71 plus something. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks, we take our b term, b is 4, and we need to calculate b divided by 2 squared. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 goes here, and we don't have any constants out here to multiply in, so that means we're going to have a 4 on the other side. Okay, now what we're going to do is we want to factor this. So we want to factor this. We need to find two numbers that multiply to 4 and add up to 4. Right? Do that correctly, it should be 2 and 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. Divide each of them by your a term in front, which is 1. So this should factor to x plus 2 times x plus 2. So let's go ahead and write that on the left hand side. X plus 2 times x plus 2. And we have 71 plus 4, and that is 75. These factors are the same. Let's group them together. X plus 2 squared equals 75. Next what I want to do is I want to get rid of the square here. Let's get rid of the square. Take a square root. The square root of both sides cancels. X plus 2 equals square root of 75. Right, square root of 75. Let's go ahead and break that up. 75, I see, breaks up into 25 and 3. 25 breaks up into 5 and 5. So what I see here is if we were to go ahead and write this, x plus 2 equals the square root of 5 times 5 times 3. Okay, so what I see here is that these are my partners in crime in jail. So one gets shot, one comes out. So when we write this, this is x plus 2 equals 5 times the square root of 3. Now again, what I mentioned earlier is since we took a square root, we need to consider both the positive and the negative solutions. Next, what we can do is we want to solve for x. In order to solve for x, we're going to subtract 2 to both sides. Like I mentioned earlier, when you cannot combine these terms, they're not like terms. So this is going to be x equals, and we have a negative 2 plus or minus 5 square root of 3. So in other words, what we have is we have x equals negative 2 plus 5 times the square root of 3, or we have x equals negative 2 minus 5 times the square root of 3. And of course, you could put that in your calculator if you wanted to see what those actual decimal values are, but if you want to leave it in radical form, that is totally fine. All right, so I have one more example to show you, and that'll be it. Okay, bye. Hello. All right, let's jump into the final example. Okay, clearing the screen. All right, so let's say I gave you something like 3x squared minus 6x equals 6. Okay, so what we want to do, again, is we're going to do this process called completing the square. So we want to complete the square and solve for x. So what I see here is we're going to group together our x squared terms and our x terms. So when we group these, we look to see if we can pull out a common factor. What I see here is we can pull out a 3. So let's pull out that 3. So we have 3 times x squared minus 2x, and then equals 6. Okay. Next, in completing the square, what we need to do is we need to create blanks. 3 times x squared minus 2x plus blank, and this equals 6, and then plus another blank, right? Take our b term here. B is negative 2. Calculate negative 2 divided by 2 squared, because b divided by 2 squared, and that's going to be negative 1 squared, and that is 1. 1 goes here. What goes on the right hand side, we need to balance out the left and the right hand side. So this is going to be 3 times 1. 3 times 1, as you can see there. So let's go ahead and clean this up. What I see here, right? Find two numbers that multiply 1, add up to negative 2. Do that correctly. I think it's negative 1 and 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is going to be positive 1, and negative 1 plus negative 1 is going to be negative 2. Divide each of these by your a term in front, which would be 1, and this should factor to x minus 1 times x minus 1. So let's go ahead and write this. 3 times x minus 1 times x minus 1, and then this equals, so 6 plus 3 times 1 is going to be 9. Okay, what I see is these are the same, so we can go ahead and group them together. So 3 times x minus 1 squared equals 9. Next, what we want to do is we want to get x by itself. So in order to get x by itself here, what we can do is we can go ahead and divide both sides by 3. So divide both sides by 3 gets rid of the 3 here, and we do 9 divided by 3. So x minus 1 squared equals 3. Next, what we want to do is we want to get rid of the square in order to solve for x. So we're going to take the square root. So take the square root of both sides. Square cancel out with the square root. So now we get x minus 1. And if you think about this, right, 3 just breaks up into 1 and 3. There's nothing that we need to, this is already in simplest radical form. So what we can already do is this is just plus or minus square root of 3. Okay. Last thing that we need to do is we need to get x by itself. So in order to get x by itself, what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 to both sides. So add 1 to both sides. This cancels. Again, these here are not like terms because we're combining a constant and a radical. Constant is not the same thing as a radical. So we have 1 plus or minus square root of 3. So if I were to just write everything on the side here, basically this is x equals 1 plus square root 3, or x equals 1 minus square root of 3. All right. And that, if you're wondering, basically summarizes everything that I've gone over. Right. And that is it. Hey, let me know if you have any questions on this. Okay, bye.